And it is the Saturday Coffee Klatch with Heather Lofthouse and yours truly, Robert Reich. Heather, week number 5 of the Trump-Musk-Vance regime. Or is it the Trump-Vance-Musk regime? I don't know. But
monarchy. I think it's monarchy.
It's monarchy. Well, we should talk about monarchy today, right?
We have, first of all, a special guest. So excited. Rohit Chopra, former director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. We're big fans. He's coming in. But then before that, we've got to do it. King Trump, if we're talking about that, the fact that he is joining Putin and the global oligarchy. And also, is it time for America to consider a third party?
Whoa.
I know.
You are so provocative today.
Well, I think questions we need to be asking.
How are you, by the way? I haven't asked you. Are you doing okay?
Do I seem like I'm not doing okay?
No, you.
Is it showing? Is it showing?
No, you're doing great. I mean, you're doing great. I don't. After last week's podcast, I got several people telling me that I looked like I was going to have a heart attack. I looked so enraged, so upset, and but I kind of wrote back to people and said, well, I was a little upset, but Heather calmed me down in her inimitable way. But are you?
I love that. So I thought you were fired up, but I didn't think you looked unhealthily fired up.
I have a hard time.
What? Staying healthy? Not being fired up?
No, I have a hard time sort of staying calm with all this going on, but I'm trying.
I'm trying to, but it's hard. I mean, the daily onslaught, I try to put one foot in front of the other, do what I can during the day, pay attention to my kid, build his eukaryotic cell for his 6th grade science class. I mean, you kind of keep going every day with the little stuff and the big stuff. Okay, let's get into it. Enough of this schmaltzy stuff. So,
okay.
King Trump. I mean, so it started the kingdom. And if we have to have a new segment that's the palace update, I'm going to quit the clutch. So this has got to stop soon. So tell us how you saw it unfold as it relates to New York's congestion taxes. Go.
Well, I mean, it was really not a hugely big deal. I mean, he just decided to basically thumb his nose, as he normally does, at another part of government, in this case, New York State, which had approved a congestion pricing scheme to reduce congestion in New York City by having a toll. And he said, he used presidential authority, which obviously is going to be questioned in the courts, to say, no, you can't do that. New York State can't do that. And then he said in a message about what he did, he said, long live the king. And mean, and then the White House put this out with a kind of a mock drawing or painting of Donald Trump on a kind of mock Time magazine cover, which he loves Time magazine covers. He loves relics. He's put out fake magazine covers of himself on Time magazine before, with himself in a crown as King Trump. Well, I mean, this created a little bit of both a lot of ridicule. Kathy Hochul, who's the governor of New York, said, we are not in a kingdom here. We fought a revolution almost 250 years ago against a king. And Governor Pritzker of Illinois said this, something very similar. It opened the door to a lot of Democrats giving it as much seriousness as it deserves, which on the surface is no seriousness at all. I mean, this is just Donald Trump being Donald Trump. But under the surface...
but it builds up. It's building up. So,
exactly.
And this is but I mean, a monarchy, we are not interested in that. We got away from that on purpose. We designed a constitution, the founders, that was not a monarchy. Means often that a deity, right? A god has appointed this person with absolute power forever unless they abdicate. That's not something we do in America.
Well, it's not something we have done in America. In fact, the Constitution was designed with George III in mind, who we revolted against 250 years ago. And the first article of the Constitution is not the executive. It is Congress. That is the most important, or the founders thought that was the most important part of the Constitution. The Congress, the people's expression, the expression of the people's will. And they did everything they could to make sure that there were, we learned this in high school, checks and balances. And there were, a judiciary.
Middle school we learned it.
Yes, even some people learned it in high school. Some Republicans never learned it. But there were supposed to be checks and balances and balance of power so that an executive could never become a monarch, a king, could never have that much power, that these were competitive branches of government. But Donald Trump has come in
and you saw these executive orders, the executive orders this week. There have been some new ones, including one that basically says that only Trump and the Attorney General, who is now Pam Bondi, can be ones to interpret laws related to the executive.
And I don't know what to make of that. I don't know what that means. I mean, the judiciary, Article 3 of the Constitution. So Article 1 is the Congress. Article 2 is the president. Article 3 is the judiciary. The Constitution is a very small document, and it makes it very clear. The judiciary.
Do you have yours with you? I love when you have yours in your pocket.
I usually have it.
This has happened, people. He will bring it out in a meeting or at a coffee shop.
Well, because we all should have our constitutions with us. But Article 3 is very clear. The judiciary has the power to interpret laws, any laws that apply to the executive, laws that apply to independent regulatory agencies, laws that really even laws that apply to Congress in terms of their constitutionality. That's up to the courts, the federal courts. What has Donald Trump done? Well, he has said, number one, I don't have to be bound by Congress's laws. I can stop and freeze federal payments. I can say that laws of Congress just have no effect whatsoever. And by the way, I don't even have to be bound by the court system. I can just disregard what the courts are saying, which is actually what's happening right now, because this is very, very important. It has not got enough attention, I don't think, Heather. The case that went to the federal courts about the freeze that said that it is it's an illegal impoundment of funds. Congress has the power of the purse. And Donald Trump does not have the power to turn the spigot on or off. That case was very clear that Donald Trump does not have that power, and it was basically, to put the matter simply, Donald Trump has said, well, the courts can be damned. I don't care what the federal courts say.
Part of it was the concentration of power was the issue with the monarchy, right? This is why we designed the system we have. What about the executive order this week, too, curbing the power of independent agencies? That's another piece to the puzzle. Absolutely.
And that's something that Donald Trump would like to have. He's requiring all of the independent agencies. Now we're talking about the Federal Trade Commission, the FCC, the FAA. All of these agencies that are designed by Congress to be independent of politics. They're supposed to be headed by commissioners who are experts in their field. This goes back 100 years ago. The Federal Trade Commission was founded in 1914. But he's now saying, no, all of these independent agencies have got to send their rules, if they're passing new rules, to me in the White House, and I have to approve them. Again, this consolidating, this concentration of power in the hands of one man. He's saying to the Justice Department, in effect, all of the stuff we went through with Richard Nixon in terms of giving you, the Justice Department, independence from the presidency in order to ensure the that the Justice Department would be neutral, that it would not be politicized. Well, forget that. I am going to politicize the Justice Department. I'm going to have a FBI chief who was just confirmed by the Senate, Kash Patel, who has he has an enemies list. This goes right back to the Nixon administration. Nixon had an enemies list, Nixon and his attorney general went to prison because of the violations of the Constitution, violations of law. We're seeing the whole thing again, even bigger than we saw it before.
And so many federal firings this week. I mean, the IRS, it was around 7,000. By the way, it's tax season. Then we had the FAA.
Excuse me, Heather.
Yeah.
7,000 people who are not going to be looking at taxes, and this is all about the oligarchy. It's all about the richest people in this country, because the people who are audited are not normal average working class Americans who have $50,000, $60,000, $75,000 of income. No, the people who are audited are people who have millions of dollars of income. But if the IRS doesn't have the personnel, they cannot audit these very wealthy people. That's the whole reason that the Biden administration asked for additional IRS personnel. For every additional IRS personnel, there are $3 that are coming back to the government from people who should have been paying taxes, mostly very wealthy. So when you get rid of people in the IRS, you're making government safe for the oligarchs. That's what you're really doing.
Right. And we've seen the FAA lost hundreds of workers too, I think up to 400. And again, they had to do with air traffic safety. And then we've seen additional probationary workers across different departments who have been let go. But all week I've been waiting to ask you this. So Musk, it's easy to conflate, went on Twitter, X this week, and said, was retweeting some people the DOGE bros are citing President Clinton. I mean, a lot of people have tried to downsize government, they say. You were around for the Federal Workforce Restructuring Act of 1994. What was that, and how was that different than what's happening now?
Well, let me just tell you, it's very, very different. First of all, when I went into government, I was 6'4". I was downsized considerably.
Here we go.
No.
It shows.
It did show, and I'm still trying to grow back up. But the real downsizing occurred almost without any firings. This is the big difference. I took the Department of Labor from when I got to be labor secretary, it was about 14,000 employees. I got it down to about 11,000 employees, and we rearranged work to make it more efficient. I think that efficiency is a good thing if you can still accomplish what you accomplished before with fewer workers. But I didn't fire anybody. We did it all through attrition. There's naturally a number of people who are going to seek better jobs. Every year, the government loses some people. And I thought it was very important not to fire anybody. When you fire somebody, you are creating so much tension, problems, stress created for them and for their families. And, why do that? That's not necessary. It wasn't necessary to get down from the 16,000 to 11,000. But Trump is not doing that by attrition. Trump and Musk are just hacking away at the federal workforce, just sending out notices that you're terminated.
And those were the good days when Al Gore, he was the one who was really in charge. And at least a vice president is indirectly elected through the Electoral College. I mean, we have Musk in charge of this.
Yes, Gore was in charge of making the government more efficient, and he had a group, and they did. But you see, another difference here, Heather, is that Gore did it step by step, very, very carefully. The goal was not to reduce what the government was doing, but to do it better, but not take a wrecking ball to the government. And that's exactly, the wrecking ball analogy is exactly appropriate now. This is what Musk is doing. And a lot of people don't know it, but they will find out because a lot of government services are not going to be there.
I know it. I know it. I know it. So one other thing that just happened was there is a budget moving through the House, gonna go to the floor next week. Can you tell us what that looks like and where they're expected to find all this money they're going to be looking for?
Well, this is, again, it has been underplayed in the press so far, but extraordinarily important. And it is part of the same theme of centralized power and control. But it's even worse because what they are looking for is about $2 trillion of savings, that is cuts in spending programs, in order that they can have a huge tax cut that is mostly going to go to very wealthy people in this country. There's no secret about that. That's what happened last time with the first Trump tax cut that went into effect in 2018. They want an extension of that tax cut. They want to do even more. And that is, again, a big, big benefit to the richest people in this country who have never been richer. I mean, look at what has happened to wealth and income in this country certainly over the last 20 years, but even more over the last 5 years. In terms of billionaires. But where are they going to get the $2 trillion of cuts of spending? Well, this is important. The biggest places to get the cuts are Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and the Department of Defense. But they don't want to cut the Department of Defense. In fact, they've added $150 billion
saw that.
To the Department of Defense.
$150 billion added.
That's right. And they've added money to border security, to the Homeland Security. So where are they going to get even more money from their cuts? Well, they're going to zero in. They've instructed the relevant committees in the House, which is the committee that oversees Medicaid, to come up with $880 billion of cuts just in that one committee. $880 billion of cuts. Where is it going to? It's Medicaid. Now, Medicaid insures half the children in this country. Medicaid is a benefit for about a quarter of all of the women in this country who are of childbearing age. Medicaid is a major program for the elderly who are poor. Medicaid is sort of the last insurance, the last stop for Americans. And if you ever wanted to understand what this administration is about, this reverse Robin Hood, taking from the poor, cutting Medicaid, and giving it to the rich in terms of a big tax cut, that is what is happening. And Democrats ought to be screaming about this from the
this
rooftops.
Is the question, right? So here is this budget that he's calling one big, beautiful bill. It feels like it's more borders, bombing, and billionaires. I mean, that's really
good. Borders, bombing, and
alliteration.
Billionaires.
That is the budget. But so where are the Dems, Bob? I mean, I open the New York Times on my laptop and it's Trump says, Trump did, Trump replied, Trump dictates, Trump. I mean, where are the Dems in all of this and how do they break through?
They're nowhere.
Or will they?
I'm looking around. Are they around where you are? I've been looking around by desk.
I'm waiting for the alerts on my phone.
I mean, the Democrat leadership, I don't remember them ever being so quiet. Now, one theory I have is that they are being quiet because they say to themselves, let's keep our powder dry. We don't have an election coming up until the midterms. If we scream right now, people are going to get tired of us screaming. That's one theory. I'm not sure I believe that at all.
Right. Keep going. What's your next one?
Another theory is that they don't want to be sounding as if they want to protect the government civil service, that they are the protectors of fraud, waste, and abuse. They don't want to feed into that caricature of Democrats. So they don't want to give Trump and Musk and the Republicans that weapon to say, oh, the Democrats are just spending, the big spenders, and they just tax and spend. You know, the old tax and spend that comes from the last 20, 30, 40 years. Maybe that's what's going on. Another thing I hear from Democratic staffers and from occasional Democrats in Congress is that they just they can't get their act together. They have, some of them are up for re-election in some places that have a lot of MAGA people. They don't want to take a chance. Others are sort of saying to themselves, well, you know, I'm just not sure of the terrain. And still others are saying, well, let's let AOC and Bernie and Elizabeth Warren speak for the progressives in the party. We don't have to be heard. It doesn't matter which of these views is dominant. Heather, the fact is Democrats are unbelievably quiet.
Deafeningly quiet. But these theories feel like we're living in a real world. I mean, that feels like the status quo. Like, well, you know, I get it. It is 4 weeks in to mayhem. So it is not obvious what should be being done. But those theories assume that we're kind of in business as usual, and we're not. So don't we need responses that are not as usual?
Very important point. Why? I mean, this is not an ordinary time. This is what Democrats usually say when they are outnumbered, when Republicans have control over both houses, both chambers, and with a Republican president. I've heard this before from Democrats, but this is not an ordinary time. This is an emergency. Democrats need to be heard. I think one of the biggest problems out there in the country is that many Democrats, many progressives, many independents think that there's no resistance, there is no opposition, that everything is being steamrolled. It gives Trump more authority by the absence of any real strong statement against him.
I know. And he is not popular and Musk is not popular. We know that. But also the latest Quinnipiac polls showed that the congressional Dems are they're at 21% in terms of people who are pro-Dem. I mean, it's all the numbers in all the different slots are not looking good.
Well, the Democrat Party has never been, you know, I think that, you know, there's one thing to understand here is that these parties, every time you see the Democratic Party or even the Republican Party, they are not really what you think they are. They're not big, major organizations. Cohesive, right. They are funding, they become funding agencies, funding mechanisms. So they're not these massive things that can be manipulated. I mean, the head of the Democratic National Committee, how many people even know who was just elected head of the Democratic National Committee? How many people even care? How many people even know how the Democratic National Committee was elected? I mean, these parties are just But
it would be
empty.
fun. It would be fun and interesting and important if maybe we did, if something changed and we did know who those people are. But you've said, and you've been around longer than I have, which is so fun for me to be able to say.
I've been around so much longer than you have.
I mean, not
Heather.
that much longer. But really, there are examples from the past when Democrats spoke up. Can we remember those? Can we hearken back? Can we channel something from them?
I'm going to channel right now.
Yeah, just think
Ready?
back.
I'm channeling back. Now,
in your near-term memory.
It was not near term. I was not alive when Franklin D. Roosevelt was president.
That's a goodie.
But my parents were. I mean, he was president for, you know, from 1933 all the way to 1945, all the way through the Depression and the Second World War. And he gave voice to a new coalition, a New Deal coalition of poor people and working class people and, you know, and people who wanted and needed a Democratic Party that would speak to them. And he said very clearly that his opponents, FDR's opponents, and the opponents of working people were the economic royalists, who hated him. He said they hate me, but I invite their hatred. He said this when he was running for re-election in 1936. He said it again in 1940. He talked about, all of these powers, these major moneyed interests that were allied against him, against the New Deal, against average working people. He understood class and the importance of class in America, and that the Democratic Party had to represent the working class. Hello?
I know. Hello. And so now, I want to ask you about Putin. How do you go from FDR to Putin, Bob? How is this the reality we're living in? What has been happening in terms of Trump sucking up to Putin and joining this global oligarchy in front of our faces? This is America we're talking about.
This is amazing, Heather. And this is a good reason to ask, why are the Republicans so quiet? The leadership of the Republican Party, they used to be known not only for small government and for cutting taxes and cutting spending, but they were also known for their opposition to the Soviet Union, and then to Putin and to Russia's aggression. And they were the ones that kept America, really on guard against this kind of a dictatorship. And credit to them. But where are they now? I mean, this week has been a turning point in terms of American foreign policy. Probably the biggest 180-degree swivel we have seen, I have ever seen, because you've got Trump now saying that Putin did not invade Ukraine, but Ukraine brought on the war itself. And then you've got Pete Hegseth and Musk and Vance all saying to Europe, we are not going to guarantee your security, and Ukraine shouldn't join NATO, and Trump is right about all of this. We're seeing, in other words, a United States that for most of the Second World War, the post-war era, has been on the side of democracy against dictators, against authoritarian autocrats. Suddenly, the United States now is on the side of Putin and the autocrats against the democracies. And a lot of Europeans and the Canadians and others are scratching their heads and saying, what in the world has happened? Where are the Republicans?
I know. Where is anyone? A couple electeds put out nice little press releases. And then Mike Pence did say, we can't be Russian apologists, and Ukraine did not start the war. So he said a little something, but everyone else is just scared. Now, but where is all this rage going to go? People are mad. When is it going to bubble up, and how?
Well, wait a minute. Just let me say, Mike Pence shows a lot of, courage. But Mike Pence is no longer vice president. Mike Pence is nobody. He's not in Congress. There is no Republican now in Congress who is standing up to Trump and saying, what? We can't be on Putin's side. We can't say Ukraine started this war. I mean, what are you talking about? Where are we going?
It would be
what
career
is American
death.
Foreign policy?
They're too trepidatious. They're too selfish. No one can do that.
I think they're scared. If you excuse the word, shitless. They are scared. They don't want to be primaried. This is why every one of them voted for Hegseth and for Tulsi Gabbard, who is a big fan of Putin as national intelligence advisor. This is why they're not against what Trump did this week. Another thing he did this week, which didn't get very much play in the press, is to get rid of all of the people in the Justice Department and the FBI who were in charge of preventing foreign infiltration of American media and our social media. Why aren't they? But can I just ask again? The Republicans have no spine. I mean, if the Democrats are out to lunch, the Republicans are even more out to lunch. They are scared. They are not standing up for America at a time when America desperately needs somebody to stand up for it. And in an area that Republicans should be taking a stand.
I know. So in my hopeful moments, I think, okay, the midterms, we can do a lot of primarying. It's going to be ripe. It's going to be okay. That's going to happen.
I like your hopeful moments. I
right.
really do. Can you say
I know.
that again?
Yeah, I'll say it again every day, all day.
Great.
So, but then, I mean, there's this idea of a third party. You've brought it up before. A lot of other people have brought it up. What would that even look like?
Well, a good question. I mean, we have not had very successful moves in this country toward third parties.
You don't say.
But there's a very simple reason for it, and that is the minute a third party is threatened or begins to organize, it starts taking people away from one of the two major parties that is most aligned with that third party, weakening that one of the two major parties in a way that is suicidal. It's very, very hard. You know, the kind of realignments in America that generate a third party. When did we see? We saw it in the Civil War. We saw it in the first years of our republic, but we haven't seen it over the last 100 years. And I think the question that I keep asking myself is, are we going to get to a point with Trump, with the silence of the Democrats, with the silence of the Republicans, are we going to get to a point where there are enough people out there who say, I really can't stand what's going on, and I can't be silent any longer, and the Democrats are not going to represent me, and the Republicans are not going to represent me. I want to join a third party.
Right. And I think a lot of people will be mad that, you know, this is even a topic because it seems scary in many ways. But you're a professor, I think, first and foremost. That's the way I see you. Some people see you as a Secretary of Labor. But if I had to pick one thing, and I think it's important that we think about these things, that we consider options, that we see where Americans are and why they're so angry and disgruntled, and think about what that means and what we need to be delivering to them as electeds, as politicians, right?
Well, yes, but it's also very important to understand that no major change in this country, major movement, I mean, civil rights movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement, none of those was headed by a political party. Political parties are really not leaders in the sense of fundamental change in this country. Political parties, basically, as I said before, even before they became fundraising machines, they were not leadership machines. If we want leadership, we've got to count on citizens. We've got to count on ourselves. We are the leaders we've been waiting for. Heather, you are a leader.
I mean, everyone a leader. But okay.
I'm serious. This is a democracy. If people are disgruntled, we've got to organize. We have got to mobilize. We've got to energize.
And people are. They are starting to, and they are showing up at town halls, and they are calling their representatives in Washington and otherwise. But okay, I think enough from us. Why don't we invite our special guest in, who we're so thrilled to have, Rohit Chopra, former director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Let's get into it. Thank you so much for coming, Director Chopra, joining us in our Coffee Klatch. I have my mug.
May I thank you too? I mean, you've been through a lot. I haven't seen you since I remember years ago you asked me a question about ERISA that I could not answer, and I was really furious at you for doing that, and I haven't had a chance until this moment to just tell you how furious I was, how just kind of awful that was. Thank you.
You're welcome, and it's good to be here with you. I think that question was also really about how do we take on these big financial firms with so much power, whether it's people's retirement or people's mortgages or credit cards.
And that was you in college, right, Rohit? I mean, that's how long ago it was.
I think so.
And now you can answer that question. That was going to be my first question. You've been through, kind of really a trial by fire, right now in terms of what happened to you at the start of the Trump administration. You've done by the way, you've done an extraordinary job. You were at the Federal Trade Commission. You directed the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. You deserve all our thanks for being an exemplary public servant. And I think I'm one of your biggest fans. But because we have such limited time, what is your answer to the question you almost asked me years ago about how do you take on the powers that be?
Well, I think we actually need our government to be a watchdog, not a lapdog. I think some of the biggest companies on the planet really think that the government is there to serve their interests rather than the interests of the rest of us. And I think you see all these agencies with acronyms, FTC, CFPB, it can sound like just a soup of agencies, but what we need each and every one of them doing is checking abuses of power in our lives. And that's exactly what the CFPB has tried to do. And I think that is part of the reason why some of the wealthiest and deep-pocketed companies in the economy want to see it dead.
Well, we're talking about power, and some of the deep-pocketed and biggest companies want to see it dead. And guess what? Trump wants to see it dead, and some people would say it's dead. So what's the moral of the story? That you can't actually take on big companies?
No, it isn't dead, because here's what we're going to see, and I think it's a big open question. On one hand, you see President Trump, he actually campaigned on capping credit card interest rates, on going after Jamie Dimon and Brian Moynihan for their banking practices. On the other hand, you see Elon Musk and others who want to defund the police that look after big tech and Wall Street. So this is a live fight. And it is something that we cannot be passive about. It is something we have to use our voices and our votes, no matter where we sit, Congress, state legislatures, or just as citizens, and make sure that we do something about it. We cannot live, we're just surrendering to everything that occurs, and we have to actually act. So I'm really proud of what we did over these past several years. At the FTC, we had a transformative chair in Lena Khan. I got to serve with her where we took on some of the biggest abuses online and in the brick and mortar world. And at the CFPB, we collected $9 billion around just in a couple years from repeat offenders in banking and in tech, and put that money back in people's pockets. So, Bob, I think it's a jump ball right now, and that's really what we've got to navigate through.
Heather, I want to give you a chance to get in here, but I want to get back to this jump ball metaphor.
Yeah, I mean, I just think the scale at which you worked. So I studied public health, and public health is about the many, not the few, right? And consumer protection. So you talked about the repeat offenders. You're talking about Wells Fargo and Bank of America and the things they have done to consumers, overcharging, secretly charging, taking advantage of people. I mean, the scale, I think the Americans need to understand the scale of what the CFPB works on. Can you talk to that a little bit more?
Well, every single payment that you tap your phone with to pay, or your card, or how your payments are processed on your student loan or your mortgage, how your interest is calculated on your account, that's subject to a set of rules. And we need to make sure that they're actually enforced. A few months ago, we actually sued Capital One for withholding, we allege, illegally billions of dollars of interest on people's savings accounts. There's a lot of people, older Americans, who their primary asset is in that savings account, especially if they don't own a home. We also obtained around $150 million for people who use the popular payment app Cash App. That's just in the past 8 weeks. And what you're seeing now, though, is a stop work order. All of the investigators, all of the examiners, inspectors of the CFPB have been told, stay home and do not perform any work task at all. That's basically telling the police who are patrolling to just go home and let's see what happens. And I think that that's just baiting real financial crime that will pick the pockets of people across the country.
But isn't it also illegal? I mean, you were given by Congress a term of office that ends in 2026. The CFPB is an entity that was set up by Congress. How can a president simply deliver a stop order and have everybody go home?
Yeah, I don't know. And I think that's what there's already been some lawsuits to kind of suss out, is all of this illegal? I also, Bob, think there's a bigger question. How is this efficient? You know, we hear a lot about efficiency and use of resources. And by the way, even during my time as director, we did actually cut a lot of contracts. We reassigned employees because needs change. But if you're offering buyouts to people who were already going to retire, or if you're cutting all the new employees, many of whom are bringing new skills that are desperately needed to police artificial intelligence and so much more, how is that actually a good use of resources? And so I think it's really important. We need to get these employees back to work at these agencies and start prosecuting again those who break the law, because the only beneficiaries of that are the companies that break the law. Every single day, I think we averaged over $4 million in refunds back to people. Why is it efficient to cut that work? The return on investment was huge for the taxpayer.
It's not. Not only is it not efficient, but it's just the opposite. I mean, when you take 7,000 people, you lay them off from the IRS, just as the IRS is approaching tax season, when you need people to collect the taxes. I mean, it's absurd. But let me read you. This is a quote from one of your favorite people, one of your admirers. His name is Jamie Dimon. He is the chair and CEO, both, of the largest bank in the United States, one of the largest banks in the world. And Jamie Dimon says, I think this guy, he was referring to you, Chopra, or whatever his name is, was just an arrogant, and then he says some awful things, and he calls you a son of a bitch. Now, the fact that you got that kind of a rise out of Jamie Dimon indicates to me that you have been doing the job that you should be doing. And but I have to admit, I am just beyond furious that Jamie Dimon got his way, that you're no longer there, that there's a stop order, that Lena Khan is no longer doing what she was doing at the Federal Trade Commission, that all of this, of that Wall Street, the CFPB was put in place after the Wall Street crisis. It was, it was part of Dodd-Frank, and Wall Street is back crowing about, how much power it has and doing whatever it can to consumers, and we're going to have another Wall Street crisis, aren't we?
Well, first of all, let me say, I don't take any threats or, expletive-laden criticisms personally. I get it. It's an emotional time for a number of Wall Street executives. They actually themselves are fearful about what is going on, and behind closed doors, they're also wondering, wait a second, do we actually want lawlessness? Or do they just want the ability for themselves to rip off people and not get caught. I mean, this is really what's challenging right now. America actually benefits when we have some laws that get enforced. We benefit when there are rules of the road that set a level playing field. So I really do worry that if we don't have any law enforcement, we can see a race to the bottom. We'll have, instead of people competing on great customer service or competitive rates, we'll see people competing on how they can arbitrage or violate the law without any consequences. And I just think that's really insulting to all of the businesses, that the CFPB regulated that are actually following the law, as opposed to some of the biggest ones that violated the law repeatedly and just felt like that was the cost of doing business. I just think that's fundamentally wrong.
Now, one of the rules you mentioned that you all had serious success with was capping overdraft fees, right? And Republicans are now going to consider overturning that. Where does that stand?
Well, here's what we did. We looked up the history of overdraft fees, and here's what we found. In 1969, the Federal Reserve created a carve-out from the lending law. The lending laws are pretty straightforward. You got to come clean about what the interest rate you're charging when you're extending a loan. But at the time, many people were sending checks through the postal service. Sometimes mail got delayed. Sometimes your paycheck did not arrive on time. And occasionally, there was a mismatch between what your check was for and what you had in the account. But fast forward to today, most of those overdraft fees are for smaller purchases you make with your debit card. And some banks have turned that into a multi-billion-dollar bonanza. So a lot of consumers have found that their payments were actually reordered so that they would get 3 overdraft fees or 4 instead of 1. They found that even if they just overdrew by 35 cents, they would have a $35 fee. So the CFPB said, let's actually look to the law to what it says. So we said, you know what? You really should disclose the interest rate, just like you do with a credit card. And you got to offer the same type of information you do with other loans. And if you don't want to do that, we're going to make the exception to that much narrower, that you can only charge really the costs that it takes you to process that, or a reasonable fee. And we calculated it, and it was about $5. So of course, a bank can still make money. They can still charge an interest rate, but they got to disclose it. And what's interesting is one of the first actions we're seeing is an endorsement from the opposition here to the rule to overturn it. And the result will be billions of more dollars in fees that are not competitively priced, in many cases that consumers don't even expect or even want.
Let me just ask a more basic question here. If consumers are getting shafted and are likely to get even more shafted because this rule is not in place, because the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is not really able to do its job, and we have more and more people who are angry at the system, the kind of anger that led to the election twice of Donald Trump. Where is this heading? Where are we going? What's the logical ending point of taking all the guardrails off American business and welcoming a race to the bottom?
Well, like I said, it's a jump ball right now. And I really think that work by the CFPB, whether it was on junk fees or medical bills or what we've done to protect people's payments when they're using digital payment apps. I think it's basically the type of work that everyone in America agrees with. And the research shows that no matter what your party affiliation, this is what they want to see their government do. And the only places that it's really controversial is with Wall Street and its lobbyists. So it really depends. Are we going to just live in an era of noise where we just close our ears to what is going on? Or will we actually try and offer up what is the alternatives and the policies we need to pursue to lower the costs of getting by? You know, a lot of people who are affected by these fees, they don't have room in their monthly budgets for a few $100s in junk fees. It's what puts them on a treadmill of debt and really hurts their lives. And I get it. For some people, it just may not be a big deal, but for others, it really is. So I think, Bob, Heather, that there is a lot of skepticism about big tech, about Wall Street, and other concentrated power and the regulations that they impose on all of us. A lot of the rules that we deal with are not actually written by government. They're written by companies who set the terms and conditions and put it in fine print that we click through when we agree to something. And that's what I think people are sick and tired of. And we need to make sure that that power is in check.
Well, amen to you.
That was motivational. Bob and I are constantly looking to feel good these days, and I feel like you have delivered that. I feel empowered. That is true.
I do too. And I want Jamie Dimon to watch this, and I would love him to join us. Maybe you can join us too, and answer the question, how in the world is JP Morgan Chase or any big bank going to make money over the next 5 to 10 or 15 or 20 years if the American public doesn't trust the system?
Appreciate you coming on,
Thank you.
Rohit. Good luck.
Thank you so much to both of you.
See you again.
Yes.
Well, I found that so empowering. I'm so pleased he was willing to join us, and to think what these federal workers are going through. Bob?
Yeah, I think Rohit Chopra has been one of my heroes in terms of leading not just the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, but also leading a movement that is a consumer movement and in many, many respects, a labor movement. And I'm so grateful for him to join us today. Heather, I am grateful to you. I say this every week, but it's absolutely sincere. Your work as director of Inequality Media Civic Action is just fabulous. And as my colleague here in our weekly Coffee Klatch, it is wonderful to be with you. And Heather, I also want to thank our colleague, Michael Lahanas Calderon. Behind the scenes, Michael, you're doing a terrific job. We want you back on the show. A lot of people out there say they want you back. So we're going to have you back, right?
Come back, Michael.
But let me just say something finally to all of you out there. Because I do believe that the powers that right now seem to be ascendant, not just Trump and Musk and Vance, but the Republicans who are so willing to put aside their integrity, whatever integrity they had, and toe the line with regard to this regime. And all of the others out there whose integrity is being compromised, members of the media, members of the business leaders who are not saying anything, who are not speaking up. I know how hard this is for the rest of you, because I feel the same way. But what they want, and I'm talking again about the forces of authoritarianism, neo-fascism, Putin, What they want more than anything else is for us to give up, to feel like there's nobody on our side, that each of us is alone, and each of us, because we're alone, is powerless. That is not the case. We are a majority. We don't want a United States that sides with Putin against Ukraine. We don't want a United States that robs Medicaid and children, poor children, needy people of the insurance they need in order to give a big tax cut to the wealthy. We don't want a country in which power and wealth are centralized in the hands of a very, very few people, an oligarchy. That's what Trump wants. That's what Musk wants. That's what Vance wants. But we don't. We are in the majority. And don't forget that for a moment. We'll see you next week.